And hello there, folks. Welcome back. This is the Law and Crime Network. Good to have you along for the afternoon session. I am Michael Bryant, and we are live in many different places today. We've got a trial queued up. We've got one we're in the midst of, which we're going to get back into immediately here. One very important note that by popular demand and request, still pumpkin spice flavored this afternoon. Okay, well, that was pretty accusatory. You have the defense saying, look, judge, here's the prosecution again trying to ambush us. They've got this partial transcript of the witness they've just had made a proffer for in front of the judge, not the jury. Now the jury's going to hear at least a part of what that conversation was about. Again, a recorded conversation between the FBI and Defendant Garcia. And now for the first time, Judge, we, the defense, are getting this transcript. What's the deal? It should have been available weeks ago, and that's just wrong. And the judge really didn't say anything. Latonia, what do you think about that? I mean, I didn't hear the magic Brady word tossed about, but what do you think?
Correct, and for those people who are out there, Brady, anytime there's any type of discovery or exculpatory, any type of information, you're supposed to give it over to the other side. The prosecution has a duty under the U.S. Constitution and whatever state constitution to give up whatever evidence they have that they're going to use in trial against a defendant. And so this is kind of a surprise, because usually it's not last minute that the defense is getting evidence from the prosecution. Now, sometimes it can work the other way, where the defense may show something up at the last minute to the prosecution, but usually the prosecutor is held to the standard under Brady, under the discovery laws, that you're supposed to produce all of the evidence that you're going to use in a criminal case against a defendant before trial, so that the defense can properly be able to answer that and they're not ambushed.
Yeah, that's a perfect explanation of how Brady works. So the judge really didn't seem to give it much credence or suggest he's going to deal with it. He just said, we're going to take a break. Important to point out, it's not what the prosecution may or may not think is exculpatory. It is
Correct.
All things that the defense might in any way construe as exculpatory. So it's not up to the prosecution to decide before they cough up some info whether or not it might help the defendant. So that is one issue pending, perhaps, in front of this court. They're taking a quick break now because the defense needs to look at that transcript. It is the transcript of a conversation between the FBI and Mr. Garcia taken on or about May 24, 2016. So while we have a quick break to do that, Latonia, I got a few questions for you.
Okay.
The first, yeah, that's the way it works. I ask you a question, you answer. It's a great combination. So let me ask you about this case in terms of the convoluted nature. We're at day 7 right now, and we've already heard a lot of names, a lot of situations, a lot of phone calls today between parties, hopefully building to some crescendo. For the prosecution, and you're a prosecutor, you know, how important is it that you're able to at least get into evidence the nuggets you need to tell that tremendous story at closing?
It's huge. And, you know, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney, and what's hard in this case, and the reason why I've said from the beginning that the prosecution really needs to make sure they lay it out, is there's so many moving parts. And so you've got to be able to make sure that the jury is making sure they make the connections necessary to figure out this conspiracy, to figure out the fact that it gets to this murder for hire. And so you're going to have to go back over it. It's almost like you're going to have to do what we would call like a cheat sheet or a Gilbert's or something, or a Reader's Digest of this whole plot when it comes to the closing, because it's so much information. You need to make it really, really clear to the jury so that they understand how all these people are connected and how these defendants are guilty of the charges that you have for them.
And the soap opera includes, among other things, the fact that the defendants, Garcia and Magbanua, have a couple of kids together, but then apparently Katie left Garcia and hooked up with Charles Adelson, the dentist. And that became sort of the, if you believe the prosecution, although that is not part of this particular case, they became the source of funding to give $100 grand to the third defendant that's already pled to second-degree murder, Mr. Luis, what's his last name again? Rivera. So he gets $100 grand. He brings in Garcia, says, I'll give you 35 grand, which seems pretty generous to me. So you have to connect all of these dots to get to the people sitting at the table. Let me ask you about Garcia right now, because sitting there, this is Luis. He's the guy that took a deal, 7 years for second-degree murder, already doing 12 on a federal crime as a Latin King, some gang-related issue not connected to this case. He comes in and rats out Sigfredo Garcia, makes it very clear. We drove together in the car. We sat and trailed the victim, Dan Markel, when he was dropping off the kids. We went back to the house. I don't know why it's not just as easy for this jury to think it was this guy, Luis, that did it, not Garcia. They were both in the car. They were both there. That's pretty much undisputed. Why should the jury believe the guy who was there and took a deal as opposed to being the trigger man himself?
Yeah, and so that's part of the issue that the prosecution has as well, is trying to make sure the distinction and making sure you know that they work together, that it's not one versus the other, it was both of them together. And so that's the good thing for the defense, because at first you're looking at this case and you're like, oh gosh, you're trying both of these together, how are you going to make this all work? And so that's what the defense has got to do. They've got to be able to say, you've already got the guilty party, it's not my client, and make that very, very clear. What we talked about too, which makes this so kind of muddled, the Adelsons. The Adelsons are they're like the main characters, but yet we don't see them at all in the story. And so I just keep wondering what the jury's going to be taking from that as well.
Yeah, they're clearly the straw stirring the drink here, but for whatever reason, prosecution has not leveled charges against them. We're going to take a quick break. Coming right back. This is Law and Crime.